A very good morning to one and all who have joined us for this two-day international conference. REVA University heartily welcomes you all to this cerebral conglomeration. I, Swati Reddy, research scholar and assistant professor from the School of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, REVA University, deem it an honor in hosting today's session. A divine beginning is the essence of all important endeavors. Keeping in tune with this noble spirit, we start the day with a prayer to lead us from the unreal to the real, to lead us from darkness to light, and from death to immortality, thereby ensuring peace for all, as envisaged in the sacred Upanishadic lines. I quote, Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. As Carl Jung says, I quote, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light of meaning in the darkness of mere meaning, unquote. Interaction and exchange of thoughts and ideas constitute the essence of knowledge. To read, to reflect, and to question are at the heart of true knowledge. We wish that the convergence of intellect, creativity, and novelty lead to a fruitful discussion. It is indeed a proud privilege to be a part of this two-day international multidisciplinary conference on representation of violence in literature and media on the 30th and 31st of May 2023, organized by the School of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, REVA University, in collaboration with Liverpool John Moores University, Liverpool, England. We acknowledge the constant support and guidance of Dr. P. Shyamraju, Honorable Chancellor, REVA University, Pro-Chancellor Shri Umesh Raju, REVA University, Dr. M. Dhananjaya, Vice Chancellor, REVA University, Dr. N. Ramesh, Registrar, REVA University, our Pro-Vice Chancellor, Dr. R.C. Biradar, REVA University, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Dr. Vidya Shetty, REVA University, and Dr. Binaji, Controller of Examinations, REVA University. We thank you all for your guidance and support throughout. And now, may I invite the convener of the conference, Dr. Abhisarika Prajapati, to kindly highlight the objective of the conference. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Swati. I welcome you all. A warm welcome to you, sir, that you accepted our invitation as has joined us for this conference. We are really grateful to you. I quickly elaborate the objective of this conference. Violence often finds expression in varied forms in both literature and media. Depending on the nature of narrative, violence can be represented either through graphic descriptions or psychological and emotional suffering. As representation is a politically loaded term and intrigues the question as to what is selected and how it is constructed, therefore, a critical inquiry to investigate the representation of violence in different domains and disciplines become inevitable. Identifying intersection of such a representation with gender, caste, class, religion, community, culture, nationality, nature, and environment, informing new structures of power play will certainly bring to light new and unexplored perspectives and understanding of the dynamics of violence. This conference aims to create a vital platform to connect scholars, teaching fraternity, as well as students to create dialogues from different perspectives to understand forms of violence. And without any further delay, I hand over the session back to Swati Reddy. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We are filled with gratitude and thankfulness to know that Dr. Emma Roberts, Associate Dean for Global Engagement for the Faculty of Arts, Professional and Social Studies at Liverpool, John Moores University, has conveyed her best wishes for the grand success of the conference. We are so much thankful to you, ma'am. And now, may I invite Dr. Payel Chowdhury, Director, School of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, REVA University, to kindly deliver the inaugural address and set the context for today's session. Dr. Payel Chowdhury specializes in gender and sexuality studies, film studies, and cultural studies. She takes active interest in the study of folk culture and literature from India's Northeast region. She has authored several books like Lockdown Diaries, Stories of Unusual Times, The Nagas, Social and Cultural Identity, Texts and Contexts, The Women of Fulbari and Other Stories. Her journey throughout remains a great source of inspiration. I heartily welcome you, ma'am, and over to you, ma'am.
Would you like me to start now?
We are apologetic for the delay. Actually, there is some technical glitch which Dr. Payel is facing, and she's not able to log in. We can proceed further. I'm delighted to announce that the response of this two-day international conference has been overwhelming, and more than 300 participants have registered across the globe. I thank you all for such an encouraging and an enthusiastic response. I once again welcome all the participants of today's session. I deem it an honor to welcome and introduce the esteemed speaker for today's session, Professor Bill Ashcroft, Emeritus Professor, School of English, Media and Performing Arts, University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. A founding exponent of post-colonial theory and co-author of the seminal text, The Empire Writes Back, the first text to examine systematically the field of post-colonial studies. Professor Ashcroft is author and co-author of 21 books, variously translated into 5 languages, including Post-Colonial Transformation, Post-Colonial Futures, Caliban's Voice, Intimate Horizons, and Utopianism in Post-Colonial Literatures. He's the author of over 200 chapters and papers, and he's on the editorial boards of 10 international journals. Professor Bill Ashcroft has taught in the faculty since 1988. He was instrumental in developing the Australian Studies program in the faculty, the teaching of post-colonial literary studies in the school, and has developed various forms of innovative, interdisciplinary, and electronic educational initiatives. He remained the Chair Professor of English at the University of Hong Kong from 2005 to 2008. We're extremely overwhelmed to have you with us, sir, and thank you so much for being with us. I accord a hearty welcome to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to talk about the representation of violence. And I want to take a particular line on this, and I'm going to share my screen if I can. Just bear with me a second. This is not working so well. Okay. Great. Now, sorry about this. It's a new thing for me. I'm much more used to Zoom, but I'll see how we go, and tell me if you can see this. Conflict and transformation. Is that coming through, this PowerPoint?
Sir, we can see one Word file that you have shared. I think Joseph Leo something.
Okay, so you can see that. I want to talk about conflict and transformation, and I want to think about ways in which violence can be resisted. And I'm looking at art and literature in particular to see what interventions they can make into the situation of violence and conflict in the world today. Now, Martin Luther King, you might already know, had this amazing statement that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Now, this is a statement that is redolent of hope, and that hope, I think, will never die. On the other hand, Slavoj Žižek says, I'm a pessimist in the sense that we are approaching dangerous times, but I'm an optimist for exactly the same reason. Pessimism means things getting messy. Optimism means these are precisely the times when change is possible. Now, there are many ways in which we can apply this. Of course, one of the great acts of violence on the world today is, of course, the violence against the climate. And climate change requires very much a sense of possibility. We can't resist the destruction of the climate unless we really believe that a different world is possible. And that is what I am going to talk about, seeing the world differently. Now, a few things we might already know. The 20th century is the most violent in history, and it has led towards a continuation of violence in this century. And the obvious thing is that conflict is always a struggle for power. But Edward Said made this famous statement. He contended that the intellectual, writer, and artist speak truth to power. Of course, it's another question about how we can make power listen. But nevertheless, this is a function of art and literature. And the idea of transforming the technologies by which we are oppressed in order to resist is something I want to talk about today. Art and literature can speak truth to power by speaking beyond it. And I want to talk about transformation as resistance, or resistance as transformation. Now, there's a very common saying, the book and the barricade. Is the book or active resistance going to be more effective? Will literature change the world? Now, the poet Auden had a quite a clear idea about this. He said, poetry changes nothing. But nevertheless, I want to suggest that creativity generates hope. Now, just recently, Joan Baez celebrated her 82nd birthday, and she was reminded that when she was just 19, at the March on Washington, she sang "We Shall Overcome." And she says in an interview, I wasn't naive enough to think that it would happen in my lifetime, but it will happen. And that's a kind of hope that I think art and literature can instill in us. And that is the way in which violence can ultimately be resisted. Now, it just seems to be pretty futile in the short term. When we see what's happening in the Ukraine at the moment, the huge destruction that's going on there. But nevertheless, I want to suggest that in the long term, creativity generates change. By seeing the world differently, we can open up the path to a different world. Now, Mahmoud Darwish, the Palestinian poet, says, here on the slopes facing the sunset and the cannon mouth of time, near orchards stripped of their shadows. We do what prisoners do. We do what the unemployed do. We cultivate hope. So even people standing in the cannon mouth of time, or the cannon mouth of the dominant Israel army, can cultivate hope. So creativity is the act of stepping beyond. This is how newness enters the world, says Rushdie. And that capacity to step beyond is absolutely essential to the creative spirit and to art and literature. Simply by imagining the world differently, the creative work shows the possibility of a different world. Now, if you can see behind me, there's a picture on the wall, and that's a drawing of Ernst Bloch, who says, thinking means going beyond. And I want to talk about him in a minute, but I want to impress upon us the importance of the creative spirit in seeing the world differently, in paving the way for a different world. Now, Paul Ricoeur says, may we not say then that the imagination itself, through the utopian function, has a constitutive role in helping us rethink the nature of our social life? Is not utopia, this leap outside, the way in which we radically rethink what is family, what is consumption, what is authority, what is religion, and so on? Does not the fantasy of an alternative society and its exteriorization nowhere work as one of the most formidable contestations of what is? Now, this is a very important, significant suggestion by Ricoeur, that nowhere is the only place from which ideology can be critiqued. Now, there's something called Mannheim's paradox. Mannheim suggested that ideology can only be critiqued from ideology. So one form of ideology can only be critiqued by another. And this is where the utopia that exists nowhere, comes in for Ricoeur. It's the only place from which ideology can be critiqued. Now, in his inaugural lecture, Ernst Bloch asked this question: can hope be disappointed? And he came to the conclusion, hope can be disappointed, but it cannot be destroyed. For Bloch, art and literature have a particular function for projecting into the future. Now, he had this term, he used this term quite commonly, Vorschein, foreseeing, the anticipatory illumination of a different world. All art and literature contains this capacity for an anticipatory illumination of a world that can be different. And he also had a very important term called Heimat. Now, Heimat means home in German, but he used Heimat to mean the home we have all sensed but have not yet experienced. That home on the horizon, that home to which we are projected, to which we're traveling. So now the creative work is something that is never finished. Bruno Latour brought out the difference between creative and critical work. One, he says, is imminent, the other is imminent. And these two words, one, the deep inside, imminence, versus the possibility of something happening. Now, I want to suggest that all creative work is imminent in the sense that it projects into the future. And the idea of creativity being completed is quite wrong, because every reading, every viewing, every experience of a creative work is a recapitulation of it, is a realization of it. So the creative work is incredibly important in giving us a sense of possibility, a sense of a possible world beyond the violence, a world beyond conflict. Now, I want to talk about forms of resistance. We think of resistance mainly as opposition, but I want to suggest that what post-colonial studies, post-colonial literatures in particular, have shown us that by transforming the technologies of the dominant power and using them to represent ourselves, we can transform violence and resist. Now, the term HIMAP may reconstitute our understanding of resistance, and I'll explain why. Now, Darwish says instead of siege, to resist means to be confident of the health of your heart and of your balls, and to be confident of your incurable malady, the malady of hope. So the malady of hope is that which lies at the center of resistance. Without hope, the world can't change. Without hope, there's no point of resistance. Now, Ghassan Kanafani is a Palestinian writer who introduced the term resistance literature. And for him, there was an integral relationship between armed resistance and culture. And it was quite uncompromising in his view that resistance was all about opposition. Now, I want to suggest that the oppressors have locked the oppressed into a binary opposition. And that's what this form of resistance is. You are locked into a conflict which you can't get out of because it's a binary opposition between oppressors and oppressed. Now, what I want to suggest is that literature and art are tremendously powerful ways of getting out of this binary, of escaping the imprisonment in the binary of oppression that has characterized colonialism for 5 centuries. Now, a terrific example of this, of course, is the Caribbean. There's no more powerful example of resistance through transformation. Here is there's a people brought from Africa, cut off from home. They had to create a new sense of home. They had to create it, and they had to create it through the dominant language, through English. And what we have is a literature, a music, a culture that is profoundly hopeful and profoundly fixed on the future. I want to talk about an Aboriginal artist, a person who has appropriated the techniques of contemporary painting, but he's done it in a way that allows us to see the Indigenous world. So Lynn Onus has located himself in that ambivalent space between Indigenous and white cultures in order to give the sense of a different world, to give the sense of possibility and hope. Now, in Kerner says, by nature, violence completes itself in imagery. He goes on to say, to look is to some extent to violate. Now, this is a very interesting philosophical proposition, which I don't want to unpack too much, but it is important to think of the function of imagery, the function of representation in violence, and to take hold of that representation and to turn it around is a fundamental technology, a fundamental strategy of the transformative form of resistance that I'm talking about in art and literature. Post-colonial artists working from the in-between space of hybridization grapple with the reality of violence, appropriating dominant technologies while transforming approaches to nation, race, and history. And this is really the key to the form of transformative resistance that I want to talk about today, and it's particularly important to Lynn Onus. Now, Homi Bhabha says at one point that the borderline work of culture demands an encounter with newness that is not part of the continuum of past and present. It creates a sense of the new as an insurgent act of cultural translation. Such an art does not merely recall the past as social cause or aesthetic precedent, it renews the past, refiguring it as a contingent in-between space that innovates and interrupts the performance of the present. Now, this is not fantastic PowerPoint technique to give you great slabs of Homi Bhabha, but I just want to suggest that what Bhabha's getting on to here is the way in which the past and the future are connected, and the way in which art doesn't merely recall the past as some sort of aesthetic precedent, but it refigures it. It refigures it as a contingent in between space. And this is extremely important for understanding the way in which art and literature produce hope and see the world, see a different future, see a different possibility. The horizon of all art and literature is a horizon of difference, a horizon of hope. This is Lynn Onus in his home, and these are Australian reptiles, goannas, that he has created. He's made them. And to give you an example of the way in which Lynn Onus has taken hold of aesthetic strategies and transformed them, this is a picture called Twice Upon a Time. Now, the picture is quite obviously something that's placed over Aboriginal carving. So there's two ways of representing the world right here. And what he's showing is that there is a pictorial representation which has overlaid the carving that is a different way of understanding the world. And over the top of that is a string of barbed wire, which of course is symbolic of imprisonment, is symbolic of borders, symbolic of the fences that the white settlers brought in to carve up Aboriginal land. Now, this is the original of that painting. It's J. Johnson's Evening Shadows, backwater of the Murray in South Australia. It's painted in 1880. Now, two things you need to note here is that it is populated. There is a person there on the left, beside the river. There's a person in the gunya, but when we see Lynn Onus, there are no people. The place is depopulated, and this is symbolic of his attempt to show resistance to settler colony incursion. This is what's happened. This is what's happened to the Aboriginal people. There's an absence now here where before there were people. And this is his way of saying, of transforming this this painting, of writing back to it, if you like. Now, Another painting of Linonis's is Barmah Forest. This is a place he used to travel back to quite regularly, his home. And you'll see that the painting is painted over the top of what appears to be a wooden surface. And it gives the impression that it is only, it's just a superficial representation. It's in the form of a jigsaw, but if you look at those jigsaw pieces, they don't actually fit in the holes that are there. So what's he saying here? He's saying that I'm using the techniques of Western art to show you that this way of representing my home is not the only one, that in fact the jigsaw that I'm demonstrating here is made of pieces that don't actually fit, because the Aboriginal world is entirely different. Now, what I suggest that this form of transforming dominant techniques is a form of resistance, because it's a way of showing the Indigenous world and the Indigenous world's lack of fit with the contemporary settler world. This is on the 8th day. Now, in Genesis, God created the world in 7 days. On the 7th day, he rested and he saw it was good. But on the 8th day, Linonis said, the angels came to Australia. Now, what are they doing? One's carrying a gun, the sheep, the barbed wire. The other's carrying the Bible. And that red thing that the angel is carrying is what's called a toilet duck. It represents the introduction of germ-killing agents, hygiene, and
Sir, excuse
yes.
me, sir. Sorry to intervene, sir.
Sorry?
Sir, are you sharing any PPT or any image? Actually, we are not able to see that, sir. If you have shared any image or any PPT.
Don't tell me you can't see the
if
image.
you have.
Hang on. Well, look. All right. Let's have a look here. Screen. I'm trying to share the window. Can you see this?
Yes, sir, we can see now.
Okay, now you haven't seen anything before this, is this right? I mean,
right, sir.
Oh gosh. All right. I'll just go through quickly. This is Linonis's Twice Upon a Time. This is the original that he's writing back to. And this is Barmah Forest in the form of a jigsaw where the pieces don't fit. This is extremely tragic to me that you haven't been seeing the PowerPoint. Anyway, this is the 8th day. Now, you can see this one still. The road to Redfern. Now, Redfern is an inner city.
Sir.
Yes? Okay. It's an inner city suburb where a lot of Aboriginal people live. And it's the site of a lot of Aboriginal resistance. Now, those ribbons are the colours of the Aboriginal flag. They're heading towards a future of resistance. And if you look in the rear view mirror, you see a serpent. This is the rainbow serpent, and it's a rainbow serpent with the head of a truck. So what's happening here is that Linonis is showing us the the way in which the past informs the present. The past is not locked back there as some kind of nostalgia, but by showing the rainbow serpent as a picture in the rear vision mirror, he's showing that the past informs the present and informs the future. And this is where we talk about something that's extremely significant in post-colonial creative production, remembering the future. Edouard Glissant says that literature provides a prophetic vision of the past. An interesting phrase, very powerful phrase, a prophetic vision of the past. Post-colonial literatures continually affirm this sense of the future in the past. And Darwish again says, I believe that the unwavering commitment to resistance and defence is not some sort of nostalgia, but the saturation of present and future with the past, without which neither present nor future will come to be. In other words, the future is drenched with the past, and it's the past that gives the future its intensity. It's not just an unbroken line of time, but the past is in some ways in the future. Now, Bloch says the in front of us is always a possibility emerging from the past, not as nostalgia, but as renewal. Now, it's extremely important because, you know, very often in post-colonial terms, in diasporic writing, we think of the past as something we think of nostalgically, something we want to return to. But post-colonial writing is imbued with this concept of the front of us, always as a possibility emerging from the past. And it's a function of renewal and revivification. Now, Edward Cameron Brathwaite has a poem where he talks about the limbo. Limbo, limbo like me, long dark deck and the water surrounding me, long dark deck and the silence is over me. Now, the limbo is a very interesting dance because what it does is repeat the process of coming across the middle passage. So going under the stick, people go into an almost impossible contortion to get under this stick and come out on the other side. And what this dance is doing is representing the process of coming from Africa across the Atlantic and up into a new life. It's extremely important to understand that the everyday dance that people are doing is a constant repetition, a constant rehearsal of that process of coming through the middle passage. Now, the interesting thing is they come up, they stand, and they are standing in a different world, but they're standing straight and they're standing with a clear sense of Caribbean culture. So past, present, and future are conjoined in the creative work in a radical transformation of the reality of slave exile. Okay. I hope this frame is large enough for you to see. So I want to talk a bit about the nature of time itself. And Friedrich Kummel talks in an essay, Time as Succession and the Problem of Duration. He says that the openness of future and past is the vital condition for the conduct of man's life and all his actions, the openness of future and past. So in this way, the past is subtly connected to the future. In other words, the tension of revolution is rendered productive by its location in a spiraling progression of time. And this is where revolution means two things. We can see it's a revolt, but it's also a revolving. We revolve. The revolution is not just a resistance to the past, but it's a revolving through time. And Ernst Bloch says, for Plato, beingness is beingness. So his critique of Plato is Plato's ontology is an ontology of past. And the problem with the concept of being in Hegel was that it overwhelmed becoming. And for Bloch, beingness is not yet becomeness. Now, I bring in this philosophical considerations to suggest that the idea of the connection of past and future is not just fundamental to post-colonial art and literature, but it is fundamental to human life. And while utopias exist in the perhaps distant future, utopianism, anticipatory consciousness, is heavily invested in the present. You know, the whole debate about utopias has regarded utopias as a vain, wishful thinking. But what Bloch says is that without utopianism, without the belief that change is possible, we cannot live. So the anticipatory consciousness is heavily invested in the present because it gives the present a future. Now, I want to show something that Franz Krauss produced back in 1936, the Visit Palestine poster. And for Palestinians, the original Visit Palestine, published by the Tourist Development Association of Palestine in 1936, has come to be seen as an iconic reminder of their historical presence in the Holy Land. Reproductions of the poster have found their way into Palestinian homes and businesses around the world. Now, Amir Shamali appropriates this poster, part of what is described as the recruit Zion genre. And Shamali presents a sharply satiric commentary on the current restrictions on Palestinians from visiting Jerusalem or the Dome of the Rock. Just slightly poking above the West Bank wall there is the dome. And this is a stringent critique of the way in which the Israeli government has set up borders to keep people away from what they've been inhabiting as the West Bank. So time and utopia and utopianism are important considerations in overcoming violence and conflict. If something is to abide, endure, then its past may never be simply past, but it must in some way also remain present. By the same token, its future must already somehow be contained in its present. I want us to think about that we may think of the future as something that hasn't yet happened, but the future is connected to the past, and the past is not gone, but is still somehow invested in the future. This is a critical understanding for post-colonial literatures and art. Now, also, if we think of the present moment, I want to suggest the present moment doesn't exist. The present moment is not a point, but a process. The present moment is the past becoming the future. This moment is already gone. This moment is already the past becoming the future. So it's not a point, but a process. And I think this is extremely important in understanding cultural assertion, cultural assertiveness. In Bloch's distinction of utopia and utopianism, he says primarily everybody lives in the future because they strive. Function and content of hope are experienced continuously. And in times of rising societies or revolutions, they have been continuously activated and extended. So what Bloch is talking about is that particular kind of violence that leads to revolution, the violence of oppression, the violence of colonialism. They lead to a form of resistance that is revolutionary in the sense that it draws the future out of the past. And I think this connection of past and future is tremendously important to those societies who are overcoming moments of oppression. So when we look at Visit Palestine, we see that Bloch's term Heimat, that home we have all sensed but not experienced, is not paradise. It's there on the horizon. It's the shimmering presence of possibility that keeps us going, that keeps us resisting, and keeps us focused on the possibility of a different world. And as I said before, it's particularly important when we're thinking about the possibility of a world that is not destroyed by climate change. We need to believe in that because the struggle at the moment is very great. So let's think about creativity and the Palestinian revolution. Well, it's a grounded rather than transcendent utopia. And Davis says grounded utopias both emerge organically out of and contribute to the future development of historical movements for grassroots change. As a result, they are emphatically not fantasized visions of perfection to be imposed upon an imperfect world, but an integral feature of that world representing the hopes and dreams of those consigned to its margins. I want to reiterate that. They're not fantasized visions of a dream world, of a vain hope, but an integral feature of the world of the present, representing hopes and dreams of those who are oppressed, those who have been the subjects of violence, particularly war and cultural violence and genocide. And this belief that utopianism, that utopia is an integral feature of the world of the future is extremely important too. So transformative resistance takes hold of representation. So representation itself, we think of representation as just picturing things, but representation is the manifestation of ideological concepts. When we represent something, we are indulging in an ideological process, and this is important to understand when thinking about the Palestinian revolution. It's we need to avoid victimhood and rethink the future. Now, another very interesting Palestinian artist is Larissa Sansor and her nation estate. If we go back to the Visit Palestine, the Amir Shamali rendition of it, Larissa Sansor also has another one. She's playing on the British use of the term estate for tower block housing. And Sansor depicts a virtual Palestinian homeland in the form of a skyscraper, dwarfing the real Palestine outside. Now, this is what you'd call utopian, but it does point out something that is nevertheless achievable. The project stirred controversy when, after being shortlisted for the prestigious Musée d'Elysée Art Prize in Switzerland, the major sponsor Lacoste requested that the works be removed from the competition for being too pro-Palestinian. After the ensuing international scandal, the museum cancelled the prize and broke off partnership with Lacoste. So the representation of a different kind of future, the representation of a Palestine, which is a tower block, is something that created a lot of waves. Now, in her art, we see the way in which a nation state is represented. If you look at the floors, lobby, souk, Jerusalem, Ramallah, Bethlehem. So each place in Palestine is represented as a floor of a building. Now, what does this do? This completely reshapes our understanding of the way in which Israel-Palestine may be seen to be one place. This is another representation of it with a lot more stories. A heritage museum, Jenin, Hebron, Tulkarem, Bethlehem, Jericho. So what she's doing with this is showing a different kind of way of seeing the world, a different way of seeing the future. And it's very, you see the Dome of the Rock through the window there. We see the growing an olive tree in one of the floors. So what she's representing is the possibility of a single, a united, interactive place. Looks like a tall tower building, but can be seen to be something within which all manner of people, all places can coexist. So here's the one floor. We see the Dome of the Rock, and it doesn't need any interpretation. And so the ultimate thing for Sansor, the ultimate utopianism, the ultimate utopia, is planting the Palestinian flag on the moon. It's something that seems fanciful, well, is fanciful, but what it's doing is not saying that one day Palestine will be on the moon. It's saying that the power of hope cannot be quenched. As Bloch said, in his inaugural lecture, hope may be disappointed, but it can't be defeated. It can't be quenched. And so, to conclude, I want to say the creative works we see here are not involved in conflict in the way we normally expect revolution to occur, or in Kanafani's idea of resistance literature, but they are revolutionary in their capacity to collapse time, to fuse past, present, and future into the image that spirals into the future. There are different forms of revolution, but all must reject the stereotype of victimhood. These works are transformative in their disruption of stereotype, their rejection of fear, their undercutting of expectation. Ultimately, they demonstrate the utopian power of art and literature because they affirm that a different world is possible. Creative works confirm a fundamental truth of revolution, that no future is achieved unless it is first imagined. Now, I want to thank you very much for that, and I am very sorry that we didn't see several of the initial images. But nevertheless, I hope that made the point that the function of art and literature in violence is not simply to represent it, but to demonstrate that a different world is possible, a world that has escaped oppression, a world in which people are free.
Thank you so much, sir, for the insightful, enlightening, and a very interactive session on conflict and transformation. It was quite thought-provoking, sir. And the line that you quoted, sir, that you said, I mean, it's and without hope, there's no point in resistance. That is so very fascinating, sir. I have the question and answer. Dear participants, you're free to post your questions on the chat box.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Huh. Voices. Okay.
Sir.
Yes.
Yeah. So you spoke about creativity and creativity not being completed, not being unfinished. You said something like that, sir. The role of creativity and saturation. Yeah, sir, could you please throw some light on the role of literature in healing, literature as a therapy in times of violence?
Sorry, you're breaking up really badly. And I think the substance of my talk was this, that there's one way of seeing literature in times of violence, and that's the way Ghassan Kanafani says it. Literature must be focused on opposition, on resistance. But by using the concept of nowhere, the concept of utopianism, the concept of the future, we can see that literature is more powerful in resisting violence by demonstrating that a different world is possible. Okay, and that is that different world. It might not be obvious, but as Bloch said, all art and literature is infused with Vorschein, the anticipatory illumination of the world, the anticipatory illumination of a different world. And without that illumination, a different world is not possible. So what I'm suggesting is that art and literature have an incredibly powerful function in resisting violence, in showing a world beyond violence. Now, the presence of violence in the literature I've talked about is only intimated. What I'm more interested in is that the way in which conflict, revolution can be captured by a view of the future, and a view of the future that resists violence. We're never going to get rid of violence in human society. But art and literature can show us that a different world is possible. And by showing us that, we can move towards a different kind of world. Now, we've seen this time and again, but, you know, and I think most people, in a sense, feel a sense of hopelessness about the continuation of violence in the world. But this is where art and literature have such a powerful role to play. Now here's a question from Dr. Chowdhury. If the creative works reject victimhood at all, how can the idea of suffering, resistance, emerging from suffering in the neo-colonial world be articulated? Now, it's a very good question. Now, what I mean by victimhood is a state of mind where the victimage is the only thing you're thinking. Now, of course, one of the powerful functions of literature is to show the effects of oppression, of colonial oppression, and of power upon ordinary people. And by doing that, though, they don't wallow in the victimhood, but by representing it, show that a different world is possible. Now, there are different ways of seeing this, but of course, I was particularly interested in that point in the Palestinian approach to resistance. You know, the writer, in representing victims of oppression, can't afford to wallow in that victimhood, because then the possibility of a different world is curtailed. And it's that possibility, I think, is absolutely central to art and literature. Now, another question here, which HK is...
Yeah, may I read it?
Sorry?
May I read it for you, sir?
Okay.
The next question. Yeah, Rajesh HK has asked, violence is closely connected with religion and culture. How to stop this violence without dismantling the culture and religious values?
No, big question. Is a big question. You know something, the combination of religion and politics is utterly toxic. And it's toxic because all violence can be justified by religion, no matter what the religion. And that's why the combination of these things is utterly toxic. So what I want to suggest is that you don't need to dismantle the culture. You just need to develop a different ethic, a different aesthetic. Now, all religions have the capacity for forgiveness, the capacity for accepting the other. And so I think what we have to do in terms of religion as cultures is take it away from, you know, the effects of politics. Because once you introduce the political contest, the binary that politics brings in, religion is forced to deny itself, if I can put it that way, to become a force of opposition, a force of violence, a force of hatred rather than love. So we don't need to dismantle religion and culture. We just need to rethink them and separate them, dismantle their connection to politics. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful answer. There is one last question that we want to take up, and it seems very significant. It is asked by Akshaya T. She says, what can be the significant difference in taking of humanism and liberal humanism through the globe for accepting one man, one culture, and one language throughout? Is it possible?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's very useful to talk about one man, one culture, one language. I mean, one of the fascinating things about the world is the presence of difference and the exciting potentials of the diversity. And the thing about I've written an article about humanism in South Asia, and I think that the acceptance of one another is, well, you know, it runs through cultural studies constantly. You've got the whole issue of cosmopolitanism is the acceptance of those who are different. So I think the issue is acceptance of difference. The acceptance of difference is the way the world is, and that it is a rich and vital part of the world's diversity. Now we're getting a lot of
Yes,
questions coming through.
So many participants have joined, so they're so enthusiastic to ask questions. Shall we take one more, sir? The last one?
Sure, I'll take two more.
With your permission.
Now here's a red hot one. What's your take on the way caste and class-based politics are emerging as a form of neo-colonial oppression in the former colonial states? Okay, one of the fundamental aspects of post-colonial studies is the critique of nationalism or nativism, the critique of that nationalism, which simply takes over the architecture of colonial oppression. Now, this has happened time and time again, that you know, decolonization was driven by nationalists, very often Marxist nationalists, who had a great vision of a different world. But once that world arrived, they simply inherited, they took on the architecture, the structure of colonial oppression, and continued it. And I think that is the problem. It's the way in which those colonial superstructure has been taken over by decolonizing countries is the problem. Again, caste, and if we think of caste and class in terms of religion and violence, we can see that both of these things, wherever there's a human condition that enables you to separate yourself from others, you will inevitably see that condition as predominant and needing to be fought for. And so that is a problem again. Caste, we should, you know, post-colonial studies suggests that when we get away from the binary of centre and margin and see the complexity, diversity, and of difference in the world, then we will be much more able to live together. Now, another question just on intersectionality. The role intersectionality plays in understanding the politics of representation and the symbolic violence within different cultural contexts. Well, you know, intersectionality has been extremely important for post-colonial studies because patriarchy and imperialism go hand in hand, and imperialism is a form of patriarchy. So it's it's something that we've had to deal with. In the feminism section of the Postcolonial Studies Reader, there are a number of very interesting articles that cover this. And I think that the politics of representation, again, remember that representation is not simply picturing things, it's giving form to ideological concepts. And that is extremely significant and it's significant in understanding the connection between representation and violence. And that's where art and literature can overcome that slippery slope into violence. So that's exhausted me. But yeah, thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest. And
thank you so much, sir, for patiently answering all the questions. I mean, a series of questions, and they were really thoughtful. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Now may I request, thank you, sir. Now may I request Dr. Payel Dutta Chowdhury, Director, School of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, REVA University, to kindly deliver her concluding remarks. Over to you, ma'am. I'm elated to propose a vote of thanks. To quote Helen Keller, the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. They must be felt with the heart, unquote. I'd really like to thank our respected Chancellor, Dr. P. Shyamju, for providing us with all his encouraging support and motivation that does propel us to excel and strive towards perfection. I wish to thank our Pro-Chancellor, Sir, Shri Umesh Raju, Vice Chancellor, Dr. N. Dhananjaya, Registrar Sir, for their constant guidance and support. Thanks to Dr. Payel Dutta Chowdhury for being the pillar of support and guidance. I wish to convey my sincere gratitude to the resource person of today's session, Professor Bill Ashcroft, for sharing his knowledge and expertise and giving us enough food for thought. Thank you, sir, for sharing your valuable insights and for taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you so much. I convey my sincere thanks to Dr. Abhisarika Prajapati and Dr. Judith Enriques, the conveners of the conference, for their well-planned, executed, and thoughtful conference. I thank all of those who have joined the conference today. Thank you so much. And dear participants, kindly note that the parallel technical sessions will start at 11:45. And it's a request to all the participants to kindly join the session 15 minutes before so as to avoid technical glitches. Thank you all. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I wish you well in the conference.